Okay, thanks for coming, everybody. I think we're going to get started. Is that too loud, or is it okay? Okay. Great. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming today. It's great to see such a good turnout. We have about an hour and a half. We think we'll have some time at the end for questions. My name's Scott Oliveri. I'm manager of the Web Technology Group and part of this UDL initiative. UDL, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's the acronym is Universal Design for Learning. We have a full agenda today, so I'll get right into it. We're going to start with some brief introductions. We have Mark Sadecki and Brian Charlson from the Carroll Center, and they're going to do a presentation later in our program. And Richard Jackson is going to start us off really explaining the project mission. Richard is an expert in the field and a member of the LSOE faculty. So he's really our go-to person for vision and inspiration. So Richard, if you want to say a few words about our mission and how we came to this.
Thank you, Scott. Welcome, everybody. I'll try to be really brief because there's some wonderful stuff that you're going to be exposed to this afternoon, and I'm really thrilled that you're all able to be here today. I've been here a long time myself. Just to give you just a couple of highlights. I recall teaching a course here in 1981. Can you imagine that? I've been here since 1979, and I recall my first day here in Boston College getting off the green line, the B green line, the one that takes 3 hours to get from. And as I got off on Cross Commonwealth Avenue, I walked up this dirt path. There was no O'Neill Library. There was no hillside, and came through the woods and landed in the quads. That's quite a while ago. And soon after that, the buildings began appearing, and then, of course, the buildings needed ramps to accommodate wheelchairs, and the buildings needed, the sidewalks needed curb cuts for wheelchairs. And not long after that, we started seeing the audiovisual people dragging their heavy equipment from building to building using the ramps and the curb cuts. And there was a great example about how requirements to accommodate a very small minority of members of the BC community got to be used in a more universal fashion. And it wasn't long after that before the audiovisual people began installing black boxes in classrooms, and students that would have to sit through 50-minute lectures that were just auditory presentations. Now students got to see graphic organizers and videos that were afforded by these new black boxes in the classrooms. And it was not just helping students with auditory receptive disorders, it was also helping students that were better engaged in the classroom when they could actually see things that professors were talking about. And not long after that, we began having web support for our courses. And we had students in classes that were really not able to access course packs or textbooks because they couldn't read the textbooks or they couldn't read the text in the print in the course packs. When professors started using library resources and putting up full text documents that were accessible on their course sites. So students with disabilities, dyslexic students who are blind, visually impaired, could go directly to these course sites and access the material. Well, that made it easy for everybody. You didn't have to go, you didn't have to purchase books. You didn't have to purchase or go to the library to access text articles and make photocopies of these articles and take them home to read them. Turned out that this provision just had universal application. So now we're here looking at our broader web environment, and we're seeing that there are a lot of members of our community that have difficulty accessing the environment. And there's some regulations. These regulations have been coming in progressively since the 70s and 80s, and now there are regulations that the same regulations that had it in mind to make physical environments barrier-free, removal of architectural barriers. Now we need to remove instructional barriers and communication barriers. So here at Boston College, we really want to make this a lot more than legal compliance. we have developed a mission statement where we're moving into the next decade really wanting to be the model center. And we've adopted a framework known as Universal Design for Learning. And the framework calls for access at the beginning, but what it really calls for is a cultural change that will welcome all visitors to the Boston College community to have ease of access and ease of use of all of our facilities. We're beginning with the web space currently right now. We're fortunate in that we have obtained a federal grant to train leaders at the postdoctoral level. And we have two of our postdoctoral leaders, Joanne Carger and Fran Smith, here today. And they helped me and the task force frame this vision statement, which you really should read. I'm not going to take your time now reading it. But moving forward, this is really about not just making life better for students with disabilities, because frankly, we've done a very good job of that over the last many decades. But what we want to do is use these examples we've learned from working with students with disabilities and make them broadly applicable to all members of the community. So I'm really happy you're here today, and I look forward to more things to come like this. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Richard. So one of the things I wanted to just highlight is what Richard said about this being a framework. We chose the name of this project and initiative carefully because it's not about Section 508 compliance, which a lot of you may be familiar with. It's not about meeting some government mandated regulations. It's about creating an environment where it's accessible for a variety of people with a variety of different physical limitations. So, but what we want to do at the same time is start with something that's measurable and relatively small, which is websites. And that's why I think a lot of you are here today, because you can make a difference by complying with the standards that have been set out, and we're going to show you how to do that. So we really appreciate your support in coming out. This is actually being recorded as well, so if you have colleagues that aren't able to attend, they can watch this. So just to go through our agenda, we talked about the mission statement. I just want to talk a little bit about the project, where we've been, where we're headed. We've had tremendous support. This is an IT project simply because we wanted to start with IT websites, but it's really been a partnership. Judy Ferris, my partner in crime, and I have started this. It was I think 18 months ago or a year ago, building momentum for this really, and we've gotten tremendous support from IT and from Richard Jefferson and Diversity. Our advisory committee. Mike Burke, CIO Linda McCarthy, who's been a tremendous supporter of us as we've tried to get funding for this, Richard Jefferson, Paul Shabater out of Student Development, and Rita Owen. So we really have a cross-functional executive committee that has really helped us all along the way. We meet regularly with the task force, and again, you see a lot of folks here from different departments, and they've really provided some great feedback and input from the library at Bob Garrity, Lily Clifton, who's actually a student, and Beth Clark and the e-teaching group. In some of the work that we show with the websites, those are some of our near-term objectives, but we are definitely intending to move beyond websites into teaching and learning and assisting professors with preparing of class materials. So that's a key initiative. And Kyle Shackman, who's provided some great insights as well. So just a kind of high-level overview of our initiatives for the fall of 2011. So last year we really formally created the task force. We had to create a business case to get funding for this, and it went well. But we had to make sure we were clear about what we were going to spend money on and how we were going to use that to make change at BC. Develop a project charter and selection of the consultant, which is the Carroll Center. They're right down the street. We did look at other agencies and consultants, but they were far and away the leader in this, and we're happy to partner with them. In the spring, this seminar here is a key kind of milestone. The ITS developer training is really important as well. There are three folks in the web group, Kul Thapa, Zoe Sadler, and Ramiro Oliva, who are actually going to learn from Mark, and Mark is going to meet with them over a series of weeks so we can learn from his expertise. He spent a significant amount of time to date going through BC websites, and we've actually had a couple of major changes that we've made. For example, the global nav at bc.edu was not fully accessible simply because when you click the top item on the hover menu, it didn't go anywhere. So things that just were either overlooked or maybe there wasn't a page for that actual link. So we've actually kind of made several of these changes, and they're going to be rolling out in the next few weeks. But Mark's been going through the sites. But the key for us long term is to be able to do this ourselves and to get that expertise in-house. So with the help of the folks in the web group, they'll become experts and then reach out to other developers across ITS to share this expertise. And content editor training. So a lot of you folks here today are content editors using DayCQ. We hope with the presentation that you're going to see, you'll understand how difficult and sometimes frustrating it can be for someone to navigate a site when it's coded improperly. We're really using this to kind of share this information with the hope that people will proactively learn how they can make changes. We will have resources available. We'll have documentation. You can always contact us. Jim O'Neill and Dave Lewis, as you all probably know, will be able to help if you have questions. So rather than us, make broad, mandates, we'd rather have people learn what to do and give them the tools on how to do it. So, and ongoing, as I mentioned, Mark has gone through several BC.edu websites. The good news is we're not as bad as we feared. We always are concerned that we're doing worse than everyone. Because we do have expertise. Cool and Zoe have always taken an eye towards this, but actually a big part of it is on you folks, the content editors. And in general, sometimes if people do things in a non-standard way, it can create problems. And we definitely have incidents across websites where we should address. But overall, Mark organized the report into critical errors and at the top, and I went through quickly, and we do have a few of those, but by and large, they're just a lot of suggestions for improvement. So a brief introduction of the Carroll Center. You just see this slide right here really kind of says it all. The country's first is the leading part of every bullet. In terms of rehabilitation, computer classes for the blind, online training and mobility, and it's hard to kind of refute their leadership in this space. They also recently have worked with Major League Baseball in making their site accessible. So that was a real important factor in having them work with us. So our relationship with them will continue for the next few months, and we'll kind of assess where we're at. And we do hope it'll be an ongoing relationship because it's been great to work with them, and they've been really helpful. So with that, I'll leave it to Mark and Brian into the Carroll Center demonstration. So I think it'll take about 45 minutes. Mark's going to take us through with Brian in navigating some problem websites. No BC websites will be here, so we're not going to pick on anyone. Yeah, he actually suggested that, and I said, no, we can't do that. So after that, we're actually going to, I created a page in DayCQ that has a lot of issues, and we're going to have a little interactive session. So after you see the issues, perhaps we could ask folks to kind of show us what we did in the sample web page that I created. After that, we'll have some questions. So we'll try to get you out of here on time. With that, I'll pass it over to Mark and Brian.
Microsoft Alt Tab, BCUDI dash.
All right, thanks for showing up today. I'm really excited to have this opportunity to speak to you guys. So as you already know, this is the Boston College Universal Design Initiative, and today we're going to be talking to you specifically about how you can make the content you produce on the web using DayCQ or any other platform you have on campus more accessible. My name is Mark Sadecki. Some of the things I'm interested in are web accessibility, HTML, search engine optimization, and social media. This is my
He's the brains of the outfit. That's what it really amounts to, okay? I'm just here as window dressing and as kind of the crash dummy part of the experience. My name is Brian Charlson. I've been director of the Carroll Center for the Blind's Computer Training Services for the past 10 years and been working there as an instructor for 26 years. So I've lived the change of technology starting in the mid-'80s with Apple II computers, which didn't have shift keys. You had to use the escape key and make a capital letter, all the way through the days of CP/M and DOS, into Windows. When blind people were told, hey, it's a graphical user interface, you're going to have to stick with the old stuff, through today's accessibility to Windows-based and, more recently, Apple-based technology. And my goal in my time with you here today is, again, to show you what the real world is like as a blind or visually impaired speech user trying to access technologies at websites all around the world. The Carroll Center's been at this for a long time. We're pleased that we have developed a national reputation for things. My love of baseball turned into a connection at MLB, and we just signed a contract to be their official accessibility experts for the next couple of seasons. That's longer than most pitcher contracts these days. So I'm pretty pleased about that, and we're working with a number of other entities trying to do the same thing. Our goal is not to fix your problems. Our goal is to teach you how to get from being there in the first place by properly coding your things with the idea of accessibility in mind. And I'm so delighted that Dr. Jackson speaks of the BC community, because so many institutions in this country have put all their effort into the student experience and none of it into the accessibility of the teacher experience. Many, many blind and visually impaired professors at area or world institutions use their teacher assistants to act as their screen readers because they have no access to what's up there. We want to keep you from being in that situation. So we're delighted that we're talking about helping the entire BC community.
Great. Thanks, Brian.
I'm also standing here to keep him from looking at the screen.
Oh, yeah?
There,
I got a bad habit of doing that. Okay, so why are we here? I thought I'd summarize what we expect to learn today and go over. We hope to get a better understanding of universal design and a better understanding of accessibility and the subtle difference between those two. HTML, a basic primer in HTML. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with HTML. If I can get a quick show of hands. Okay, great. This is going to go really well. All right, how disabled people use the web, and how we can improve their experience by creating accessible content at Boston College. After that, we hope to have a little bit of time to do a live demo. We're probably going to mix in some live demo as well through our presentation, where we can show you some bad examples and some good examples of some websites out there. And then we're gonna use DayCQ to kind of point out where you can improve accessibility within that app while you're creating your content, and then spend a little time answering your questions. So we'll start off with the principles of universal design. That kind of summarizes what universal design is. To me, I think it's a very idealistic term. It's very hard to achieve universal design. There are a few really good instances of it, but you kind of want to keep these things in mind in the background and try to apply as many of these as possible to the things we create, whether it be content or hardware or software or anything in the built environment. You want it to be equally usable by everyone, flexible in design, simple and intuitive. You want to make sure that all information is perceptible. And when I mean perceptible, it's got to be, we only have 6 senses. So it's got to be one of those senses. There is tolerance for error. There's low physical effort required. And that you allow a tolerable size and space for approach and use. I got these principles from the Center for Universal Design at North Carolina State University, who's by and far the go-to place for universal design. The quintessential example of universal design is the curb cut. It was first brought about to improve access to wheelchair users approaching a curbed sidewalk, and after their use started to spread across the country, we started noticing elderly people with walkers started to benefit, or even parents pushing strollers also benefited. So that's a perfect example of a design improvement that can have broad improvements to society. We also have low floor buses. We all enjoy getting on a bus that's got a low floor. We don't have to step around things. There's nothing to trip over. We don't have to step up into the bus. So everybody benefits. Again, strollers, walkers, these types of people really benefit as well. So what is accessibility then? Well, accessibility is a more general term used to describe the degree to which a product, a device, a service, or environment is available to as many people as possible. I think it's a bit of a more realistic term, where universal design is idealistic, accessibility is more realistic, and it kind of describes the accessibility, availability of something. It can be viewed as the ability to access and benefit from some system or entity. It's often used to reference people with disabilities or special needs in their right of access to entities, and often through the use of assistive technology. So today we're going to talk a little bit about assistive technology as well and give you guys some examples of that. So what is web accessibility? Well, web accessibility refers to the inclusive practice of making websites usable by people of all abilities and disabilities. When sites are correctly designed, developed, and edited, all users can have equal access to the information and functionality. The 4 principles of web accessibility. This was taken from WCAG 2.0, which is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, version 2. This was a document developed by the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, in an effort to kind of provide a document that helps people create accessible web content. And the first version of WCAG was very it was lengthy. It
You could press your clothes under it. It was heavy stuff.
it wasn't very well organized. It had a lot of subsections and subsections and more. So with WCAG 2.0, they tried to kind of create 4 main principles that all of their ideas could fall under. And they can basically sum it up in these 4 things. So your websites need to be perceivable. Information and user interface components must be presentable to users in ways they can perceive. That means...
Simply. It means that for a
it's
blind
exact-
person,
it's pretty simple
you can
stuff.
hear it, or it can be put up on an access device like a refreshable braille display in a fashion that would make sense. For a deaf person, it means if it makes a noise, it also makes a video effect that they can perceive. If it's a person with a cognitive disability, it is kept in such a way that it's not so visually complex that they have a difficulty sorting the information out of the chat. 3 quick examples.
Yeah, I think it's a lot easier to point out examples that are imperceivable than perceivable, and it's usually for one particular audience or another. So the information, the soundtrack to a video, for instance, needs to be made accessible to someone who can't hear. So the website also needs to be operable. All the user interface components and navigation must be operable. A perfect example of an inoperable website is one that required the user to use a mouse to click on something, to activate a button. If you only allow somebody with a mouse, then that excludes somebody who uses a keyboard. Brian doesn't use a mouse.
I do, but I use it again as a paperweight.
The information must be understandable. Information and the operation of user interface must be understandable. That's a little bit trickier one to achieve. It's directed more towards a learning disability, and the best course of action to take here to make this understandable is to state your information in the simplest and most concise manner, and that's in a way that's not purposely confusing to anyone. And robust. The content must be robust enough that it can be interpreted reliably by a wide variety of user agents, including assistive technologies. That can sound a little bit scary, but all that means is that you must use the tools that the web provides us, which is HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, the way it was intended to be used, because if you don't, then the access technology, whether it be a screen reader or a braille display, it can't access that information because it's expecting it to be used in a certain way. And if you use it in a non-standard way, then there's no way for that information to flow to the assistive technology. So, how does a person with a disability access the web? It comes by many terms: access, assistive, adaptive technology. I just like to call it AT. AT is a term that describes assistive, adaptive, and rehabilitative devices or software for people with disabilities that attempts to reduce the impact or remove the disability entirely. Some examples of AT. The most obvious here is screen reading software. Uses synthesized speech to read what is being displayed on a visual output device. Hopefully we'll have time in a little bit to demonstrate screen reading software. Braille terminals or refreshable Braille displays actually work very similarly to a screen reader. If you can make your content accessible to a screen reader, it's probably going to work really well on a refreshable Braille display. They actually access the information the same way. Screen magnification software is widely used by low vision users. Elderly aging population is growing on computers, and many of them are using screen magnification that's built right into the operating systems now. So you have to make sure that your content works well with that. If they're enlarging their screen and for some reason your content isn't enlarging along with it, that could be a problem if you're prohibiting access to their zoom, to their opportunity, their ability to zoom in. Speech recognition software is another piece of AT. That's often used by a variety of learning disabilities. It's another way to provide input to the computer. So the website accepts spoken, or the technology accepts spoken commands to the computer, or turns dictation into grammatically correct text. And keyboard overlays or specialized keyboards, which make typing easier and more accurate for those who have motor control difficulties. This is a very small sampling of assistive technology. If you've ever been to an AT trade show, there's literally hundreds and hundreds of booths of people with very creative devices that make life a lot easier for people.
One other thing I'd like to add here is that AT is not a I use this or that scenario. It's frequently I use a this and that scenario. So when I whip my iPhone out of my pocket, I'm not only using VoiceOver for it to talk to me, I'm using Siri to talk to it. And it's very common for people with disabilities to rely on more than one type of access tech to get a full experience of what's on the web.
A quick question in the front row.
Closed captioning is a very common example of AT.
Absolutely.
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 And in fact, there are technologies out there that would allow a deaf blind person to access that information in a way that they simply can't access in any other way, taking advantage of captioning as a transcript of what's going on for them to follow what's going on in multimedia material.
So I'm going to quickly go over some typical features of an accessible website. This is kind of just a primer or an introduction to some of the stuff we're going to get into a little later. Accessible websites have text equivalents for images. They have links that make sense out of context. They have text that is large or enlargeable and of high contrast. They have clickable items that are large and indicate focus. They have pages that can be used with a keyboard or switch device. They have videos that are closed captioned and audio described. They have content that is written in plain English and augmented with instructional diagrams. They have an adherence to widely accepted paradigms, and they use semantically meaningful HTML markup. We're going to cover most of these in our examples. Some of them I really didn't have an opportunity to put into the presentation, like the adherence to widely accepted paradigms. If users encounter a very consistent experience, it makes it a lot easier for them to understand it. So a widely accepted paradigm is to have the main navigation of a website be across the top of the page or down the left or sometimes down the right. If you do something odd like put your main navigation across the bottom and only across the bottom, that's going to confuse a lot of people. There's this tendency to get creative, especially with Web 2.0, and to try all these new things to get people's attention. But if you're making your website harder to access, then you're really not achieving the goal there. All right, so let's get started. Practical examples of web accessibility. These are 6 topics that we're going to dive a little deeper into today. The first is provide meaningful page titles, and we'll explain why that's important. Use structural semantic HTML elements like headings, lists, block quotes, etc. properly. Provide alternative text for non-text elements like images when the non-text elements are meaningful. That's an important addition there when they're meaningful. Use color and contrast with care. Give links unique names and make them descriptive. And create forms the right way. Forms are the interactive piece of the web when you're actually asking users for input. So the first is providing meaningful page titles. I think, does DayCQ allow users the ability to create the page title? Okay. So when you first create your page on DayCQ, you're given an opportunity to create a page title. And this title actually has more significance than you think. It's the first thing that a screen reader or another AT user is going to experience when they load your page. It's not visually displayed inside the web page at all. You may notice it in the title bar of your browser. And you may think it's pretty insignificant, but that's the first thing they're going to hear when they pull that page up. And it helps them really ascertain, is this where I want to be, real quickly. So they don't have to wade through your entire page to figure out, oh, this is not what I'm looking for. Because you'll see that no matter how well you design your page, there's often a lot of exploring of the page to kind of figure out what's there and what's going on. There's been an increase lately. I think there was a rumor, and who knows, it may partially be true, that if you put keywords in your page titles, that it helps your search engine optimization. So a lot of people are trying to game the Google system by putting the keywords of their website in their page titles. And we've found a number of websites where you load up a page and all of a sudden you just get this stream of words that really have nothing to do with the page. So you want to avoid that at all costs. It's perfectly acceptable to just put the title of your page, whatever is going to be what we'll talk about later as your heading level 1 tag, your H1 tag.
I'd like to add one more value to this, and that is, how many of you have only one web page open at a time? It doesn't happen, right? You're flipping through. So with my speech technology, my Braille technology, when I'm flipping between properly titled pages, I know where I am as I release the Alt key and allow that to be the lead item on my screen and have the focus. So it's not just to know the first time that it's what you want. It's to know throughout a work session that you're on the proper screen.
Okay, structural semantic HTML elements. I use headings, lists, and block quotes as an example here. There are a lot more than that, but these are the ones that are most frequently used. Screen readers use structural information to help make reading more efficient. For example, most screen readers can skip from heading to heading, announce the number of items in a list, and identify the current row and column in a data table. So you can see that this information and the way you use it is very helpful. Identify headings, paragraphs, lists, quotations, etc. using the appropriate markup instead of relying solely on formatting. We have this tendency to kind of rely on or put emphasis on how the page is going to look. And a lot of times we'll break the rules in order to get the right visual appearance, and we have to avoid doing that. And we can talk about ways of achieving both. So, for example, use an H1 tag to identify the top-level heading rather than simply making its text large and bold. Do not misuse structural markup for formatting effects, such as using a block quote element just to indent your paragraph. So let's talk a little bit more about headings. Properly used headings give a web page a machine-readable structure that reveals the topics discussed on a page and how they are hierarchically related to each other. Access technologies operate just like machines. They go through a web page like Google does. It's the same thing. It's a computer looking at the source code of the page. They use the exact same source code or document object model. So they can get a lot of extra information, metadata, from that markup and use it to improve the user experience for someone who uses AT. Brian any screen reader user can typically just hit the H key to move from heading to heading in a page. Sighted users will just scroll up and down and kind of look at the page and look at the big words all over the place and can kind of get a very quick overview of what the page is going to talk to them about or convey to them. Screen reader users can do the same thing by hitting their H key. They can move through the page very quickly to say, okay, this is the outline. So you don't want to misrepresent that structure by using headings out of place.
And if you think of it, that what I'm trying to do is to get through a page, to navigate it in something other than top left to bottom right kind of scrolling through. It would take me ages to read pages that way. So I quickly hit the H key to find out where the first heading level 1 is, and from there I also have navigation keys that will allow me to stay within a level of it. So by hitting the 2 key repeatedly, I'm jumping from heading level 2 to heading level 2 to heading level 2. So I can stay within the structure and not accidentally find myself into the next subsection of a page. So if it's done properly, I know I hit 1s till I get to the first one, then I hit 2s to stay within it, and if I hit a 2 and it doesn't go anywhere, then I know I'm done with the heading level 2s. I might do a shift 2 to back up to a previous heading level 2, and then hit 3s to go through it at that third level of heading. It's hugely valuable, especially the more information that's on the page at a time.
I have a quick couple of examples to visit here. Brian can navigate them on a screen reader. And I actually have them out of order. I have the Harvard Pilgrim website, which is a bad example, and the CNN website, which is a relatively good example. And just to see how it works correctly, and then to show you how it doesn't work correctly, I think we're going to reverse these. So Brian, I'm going to pull up CNN. And you can just navigate to the page with H's. Let's let
CNN.com-breaking news, U.S. World Web. Page up, CNN.com.
One of the things a screen reader does, many of them do, is give me a general idea of the structure of a page. It will tell me whether or not it has headings and how many links are on the page, and I can set it up also to tell me how many frames and how many anchor points might be on that page as well. So before I hear a single thing, I know how complicated the page is and whether the author has taken the time to make it more navigable for me and for others as well. So I'm going to hit the letter H from the top of the screen.
Women at Augusta: none of your business, heading level 1 link. Election Center, heading level 4.
Notice it jumped from 1 to 4.
Latest news, heading level 4. Opinion: failure in D.C. leaves us adrift, heading level 1 link.
And I'm back up to a heading level 1 again. Is there heading level 2 as part of this?
No next heading at level 2 in section.
And it tells me that there isn't within that section. So I can very easily navigate. And I just add shift to these, and it reverses the direction up the page rather than down the page.
Now, you'll notice that, I don't know if you were able to follow, but the first heading, level 1, was this article here in the upper left-hand corner, Women at Augusta, None of Your Business, is the heading title. And then the next one was Election Center, followed by Latest News. Now, they marked these major sections of the page with a heading, and that's actually a good thing. I encourage people to do that. It makes the page easier to navigate, especially if you mark things like navigation or search or other things that a user might want to jump to quickly. It's a little confusing that they're out of order, but it's not all that bad. And then you see they also have this opinion: failure in DC leaves us adrift, which these are clearly the two most important things on this page, which is why they're heading level 1s. Home pages tend to break the rules a little or bend the rules a little bit because they're trying to put so much, especially on a news site, they're trying to put so much information on there. Where it really becomes important was when you're actually reading an article. It's very important to have so if we went to visit opinion failure in DC, why don't you actually visit that page, Brian? We'll take a quick look at that.
Menu file to move through items. Escape leaving menus. CNN.com-breaking news. U.S. World Weather Entertainment Opinion: fail. Control H. History to H. Escape opinion: failure in D.C. Latest news, heading level 4. Election Center, heading level 4. Women at Augusta: none of your business, heading.
Either one of those heading level 1 should be fine.
Okay, I'm on that. The women in Augusta. My father would love this article.
Enter. Women at Augusta: none of your business, heading level 1 link visited. Women at Augusta: none of your business, heading level 1 link.
Got a big video. We'll see how this goes.
XD proxy frame. RSS feeds. 12 frames. 13 headings and 351 links. Augusta dash
351 links on one page.
Augusta Chairman defends membership as private matter heading level 1. We recommend heading level 4.
So, Bryce, real quickly, if I can point out, he was able to jump to the top of that article very quickly. Above that, there's lots of links. The main navigation is there. If you don't provide these headings, Brian would have had to tab probably 50 or 60 times before he could get to that main content. It's the only way to move there is linearly from top to bottom, left to right. The use of headings is clearly an improvement here.
You might want to read down through this.
No, I think that's pretty good. Well, so we heard the heading level 1. I'm guessing that this we recommend, and from around the web, the other 2, I think it was 3 or 4 headings they found on this page.
No next heading at level 1 in section.
Okay.
From around the web heading level 4.
From around the web.
Add new comment heading level 3. Showing 25 of 345 comments heading level 3.
That's why there's so many links. They had this was a very, very popular article. So it was cool that Brian was able to jump to the comments section very quickly as well. So that's another great use of headings.
And naturally, when you go back to the same site time and time again, you learn some finesse in getting through this and can very rapidly ignore the things that don't matter and know what keystrokes will get to the part that does matter to you in this particular visit to a site.
Now, I'm not sure what heading level they use for the comments, but personally I would have used a 2 because it's part of the article. So the article title and a subsection of that would be the comments. Personally, that's what I would have used. All right, so that's I just
Alt
noticed
tab,
that
PowerPoint
we're gonna have to
slideshow
start
dash left bracket
picking
key.
it up a little bit, but let's quickly look at Harvard Pilgrim.
Equals portal and underline schema equals port. Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare dash for members equals portal and underline schema equals port.
So we
Are
probably
we
just,
having fun yet? Isn't that useful
Equals portal
information?
and underline schema equals portal.
so we probably just have to listen to how many links and headings there are on the page.
I got to alt tab away and back again
Sure,
to do that.
that's fine.
Alt tab. New tab page. Address and search using bin edit equals portal and underline
Nope,
schema
not
equals
telling me.
portal. Type in text. Alt
Okay.
plus D.
Jaws will sometimes do that. But you'll notice that there's things here on the page that look like they should be headings. And they would be very useful if they were headings. We have doctors, hospitals, specialists, pharmacy, my coverage. They look like headings. They're big and red, right? They're not headings. Okay? So this is a perfect example of when people make things look like they want, but they don't use the right tools to do that.
H.
I'm
So-
hitting H's, my navigation,
H.
and it's not doing anything. Either I've landed on an edit box without it denouncing, or it's done
Oh,
some...
you know what? You're in the address box, the address field. So
Escape equals portal and underline schema equals portal.
tab into that document.
Tab. Toolbar compat tab. Harvard tab. Toolbar home tab. 95 links. Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. Harvard.
95 links,
No headings.
no headings.
All right, so let's
Alt
jump
tab,
back
PowerPoint
to our presentation. All right, I have do not misuse structural markup for formatting effects, such as using headings to change appearance of text. Pretty straightforward stuff. There's heading levels 1 through 6. HTML gives us 6 heading levels. It's really important not to skip these things and to make sure that your page has a logical structure. In reviewing the BC sites, I noticed that there's a lot of times people will go from 1, 2, and skip down to 4 within an article. And it's probably just because the 3 looked too big, and it probably does for that article. It just didn't seem visually appropriate. You can work with Scott and his team to have them make some additional styling options available to you so that you can still use that 3 but make it look like you want it to look. Okay, so resist that urge to use headings to achieve a visual style. Use lists to identify a series of related items. We already mentioned that screen readers can announce that it's a list, can tell the user right away how many items are in that list. It provides an opportunity for them to just skip over the list entirely so they don't have to tab or move through the entire thing. So if it's an unordered list, your typical standard bulleted list, make sure you use that. If it's a numbered list, use the proper markup for that. Resist the urge to do like 1 dot, 2 dot, 3 dot, like typing in those numbers, because then the screen reader has no idea that this is a list. It's just going to treat it as plain text, 1 dot, 2 dot, 3 dot. It does not know that it's actually in a particular order and it's a list of items. Use block quotes for quoted text. Do not misuse structural markup for formatting effects, such as block quote to indent a paragraph. Now, if a web designer doesn't specify a particular look and feel to a block quote using CSS or otherwise, then I think all web browsers are programmed to indent that text. So a lot of times people just want to indent the text, so they'll wrap a block quote because they learn, oh, if I hit this button, it moves the text in to the right. Again, misuse of text. It's very helpful to identify not only to screen reader users, but even to Google or a search engine that what you're doing is you're quoting text from another source. This is a quote. It should be taken apart from the rest of the text. Okay, providing alternative text for non-text elements. This is probably one of the most important things we can talk about today. Okay, myth. Images are bad for accessibility. When I talk about images, some people go the other extreme. They start designing sites with no images. And that's not necessarily a good thing either. Technically, images are only accessible to people who are totally blind. What about people with low vision, color blindness, deafness, motor disabilities, and cognitive disabilities? Images are not bad for accessibility. They actually increase comprehension and usability for most audiences. So we're going to talk about using alt text effectively. You guys know about alt text? How many people in the room are familiar with alternative text? Okay, it's providing a textual equivalent for a visual image, movie, video, whatever it may be. So images can often enhance accessibility for sighted individuals by providing visual cues that aid comprehension. Illustrations, icons, animations. Graphics can be especially useful to individuals with certain reading disabilities, learning disabilities, attention deficit disorders, and cognitive disabilities. How images are used. This is probably the most important thing that you can consider when you're placing an image in your content. Images on websites are used in three main ways: to convey important content, to provide visual enhancement, and to link to other areas of the site. And I'm going to talk about how to properly create alt text for these situations. The most appropriate alt text depends on the way in which the image is used and communicates the purpose of the graphic, not its appearance. That's a big one. A lot of people assume that they're supposed to provide this very rich, detailed description of the image, but that's not always appropriate. And I'll give some examples why.
I want to tell you one thing. You know, I don't much care what a logo looks like. Just tell me it's your logo, and I'm done with it. I went to the Pepsi website, and it was 4 paragraphs describing the Pepsi logo. Too much. Too much. Especially when they repeated it on every page of the entire website.
All right, so I chose a picture of Ignatius of Loyola here. I thought it would be pertinent. So I have a painting here of a famous Jesuit. Introductory art. Okay, so this is how you can use different alt text for a single image. Okay, introductory art class giving examples of different types of art. Okay, we're talking really basic level stuff. What's important about this picture is it's a painting of a man. You also may have a picture of a sculpture on that page, or a drawing. Okay, that's what's important about this picture here. It's not important that it's Ignatius of Loyola, actually, just that it's a painting of a man, because that's what we're trying to convey in this article. If you're creating an article about paintings of famous Jesuits, it would be appropriate to have alt text that says Ignatius of Loyola. You don't have to state that it's a painting because all of the images on the page are paintings. Okay? And that's what the topic of the page is about. An article about Jesuit history, Jesuit founder Ignatius of Loyola. Tie it to the article, explain who this is, the significance of the page, how it relates to the content. And the last is an art history class, where you'd want to give a lot more technical information about the painting. Ignatius of Loyola, oil on canvas, artist unknown, 16th century. Okay, you'll notice that there's no example here where we talk about the fact that he's bald or that he has a black mustache or beard. Okay, now had we been talking about 16th century hairstyles, well, we probably wouldn't have chosen a bald man to make that example. But then you would probably describe the visual appearance of the.
The third one, article about Jesuit history. Does the screen reader, JAWS, identify it as a picture, or would that be a case where you might want to set a picture of Jesuit founder Ignatius of Loyola? In other words,
You know, to some degree, that's a very good question. And it depends on how picture-rich the page is, whether I want to keep hearing picture of, picture of, picture of, picture of in that process. On the other hand, when I'm organizing information, I want to know is it a photograph? Is it a painting? If it means that it's stylized in some fact, is it a cartoon? If it's a cartoon, then the very fact that it's a cartoon is meaningful in that particular use. So again, it's all context sensitive, which way you go with doing that.
Yeah, I would definitely, you could definitely add painting there, especially if there were pictures of other famous Jesuits and some were photographs or some were drawings, and you could definitely specify that. But you also have to ask yourself, how important is that to the content? It's a judgment call.
Well, and again, as it's reading, as it goes from the text to the alt tag and on again, if I were doing a continuous read of this page top to bottom, I wouldn't know that that was a picture in the flow. And that's what you were talking about, right? In the flow.
Right.
So depends on whether or not the page you expect person's going to read it top to bottom as a flow, or whether they're going to, it's part of a subsection that I'm likely to navigate. I wouldn't obsess on it terribly much unless it's unless it's really important that I know that it's a picture. And one of the other places where this matters is if it's going to be used a great deal where I'm interacting with sighted people and they're going to say, the picture on the screen, or the picture there showed him with a mustache and you had him not as having a mustache, then I guess I would like to know that there's visual elements that I may be getting glossed over intentionally, and would like to know there's a picture there. There are times when I call a help desk, and the help desk says, well, it's just below the red button. They'll use some visual element there that's not text to help me navigate to something. So to some degree, there are times when those things need to tell me more than what we're saying here as a general principle.
Images of text. It's almost always a good idea to mirror the text in your alt tag. Images of text should have alt tag that reflects the text in the image. Common examples of this are banners, headers, and buttons. We have like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and kind of a large banner that I took from our own website where we would have exactly that text in the alt tag. This alumni banner actually is the banner on our alumni page, and I would actually probably put it out of order. I'd put alumni first, and then we encourage our graduates to stay connected to the Carroll Center. I would not talk about the fact that there are people in the background of that image, because that's not important. It's really just kind of adding a feeling or tone.
Unless you're my wife and that's her picture.
That is
she
her,
would
yeah.
really be on me.
Okay, this is a really important one. The use of null or empty alt text. So, is it ever okay to skip using alt text? Yes, it actually is. It's never okay to not put an alt attribute. And I don't know, does DAISYQ require an alt attribute? No. Okay. So you do have the opportunity or the ability to create a big mistake, which is not putting an alt tag at all. And what happens when you do that is the screen reader will actually try to guess what that image is, and its closest guess will be to read the path to the image, like where it's located on the server. Which can actually be a very long string. And the reason it does that is because sometimes people will name like their about link about.gif or whatever. And so that could help the user in a scenario where there is no alt text. It might tell Brian that I'm about to click on an about link. But too many times, and I actually found an example this morning when I was searching for something else on the New York Times website where there's literally a string of 150 characters. It was like an encrypted file name, and it read the whole thing. So that could be quite painful. So when is it okay to just use alts? And I show at the bottom of the page here, alt equals quote quote. Okay, images that do not provide any content to the user, like rounded corners or transparent images, or images that are there to provide space. Images that are used solely for decorative purposes. I have an example of a little weird squiggly design in the lower right-hand corner here. Example of there's no need to announce that to the user.
I had a page once where I had 50 big blue bullets, and I got to hear it 50 times. There was no way to get past it.
Images, linked or not, that are described by nearby text. And if we have an opportunity, I know I got to speed things up a little bit, but The New York Times actually had a perfect example of this, where they had the image had the alt text of this exact same repeat of text that immediately followed it, and they were both links to the same place. So a screen reader user would hear that twice in a row. So if the image is a link to something and the text nearby is a link to the same place, skip the alt text on the image because it's just redundant. Action or linked images, again, follow us on Twitter. It describes what you're about to do when you activate that link. Okay? Because again, a screen reader user is going to encounter this sometimes out of context. They may move to this by hitting the tab button. They may move right to it. They don't know that they've just visually we can see, oh, we're in a bunch of icons. We know exactly kind of what these are going to do. Spell out what the action is. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, subscribe to our RSS feed, send us an email. Accuracy and brevity. Alternative text for images should be as accurate and succinct as possible. Make sure your alt text conveys all of the important information relevant to its purpose, but don't burden users with excessively long alt text. And screen readers or refreshable Braille devices will always read the alt text, which can make image-heavy pages rather long. So be as succinct as possible. So in summary, always put an alt attribute on your images. Always. Use an empty alt attribute if it's purely decorative. Think about the best alt text for your image. It depends on what the image represents. Is it a call to action, a work of art, additional content in the page? Test your page by disabling images and style sheets. Is the information all there? Most browsers will let us do that. You can turn style sheets off and turn images off. And it's helpful to do that to see, because what it'll do is it'll replace the image with the text that you have there. So you can read through your page with all of this stuff turned off and say, does this make sense to me? Yeah.
What happens with the tooltips screen reader?
That's a good question. Tooltips, you guys familiar with the title tag? Okay. Originally, the title tag was designed to be used for that purpose. But a lot of developers back in the early days didn't know that. So the first browser I think that did it was IE. They decided to do that for alt tags. And everybody thought it was this cool new feature. Well, it wasn't. It was actually just reserved for title tag use. So title tag is generally used for tooltips or to provide additional information to an image. By default, screen readers do not access the title tag. They can configure their screen reader to access the title tag, or they can actually do something interesting that says read the longest one or read the shortest one. But you should assume that they're going to have access to the alt tag. The title tag is helpful for mouse users that hover over items, but it's you walk in a fine line if you're providing them with extra information that you're not providing other users, like screen reader users, something like that. So.
I can tell you that the vast majority of screen reader users don't even know how to cause their screen reader to read it. Even though it's a feature in it, they don't know it's there.
So we're going to talk a little bit briefly about color and contrast. This one's quite obvious. There are tools out there. You can search Google for, test the contrast of my site, and there are tools up there where it'll give you a complete color analysis, and it'll tell you the ratio of the color contrast. It's pretty obvious stuff. I mean, if you think you're walking a fine line, you question your contrast, you can check it on one of these sites. You can check out the site contrastrebellion.com. They give you a great argument to use high contrast in your site beyond just improving accessibility. It's just a generally a good idea. There's been a movement. It's actually been reversed. I think people lately are starting to use big text again, which is great. But 5 years ago, there were a lot of designers that thought the text competed with their design, so they made the font really small to make their website look really pretty. But the text is what's important. So it's make it big, make it easy to read. Give links unique names and make them descriptive. This one is often confusing to people right off the bat. There are tools in screen readers that allow a user to take all the links out of a page and put them in a list. It's called the links list dialog box. And if you frequently use link text like read more or click here, You can imagine that if somebody pulls all the links out of a page and they start to go through it, it's not telling them where they're going to go if they follow that link, because they're going to be going through it in order. So they're going to hear more. Well, more what? What am I going to get more of? Or what is clicking here going to do for me? So it's important. And it also helps Google figure out what your page is about and where it's linking, because it will say, click here to learn more about accessibility. Oh, well, now we know that's where this link is going. It's going to a page about web accessibility. I like, to say just use active text in your links. Trying to think of anything else I wanted to add to.
Brian, he's looking up at the screen.
Yeah, I know it. I'm trying to work on him on that.
Again, don't be device specific. Again, saying click here, you're excluding an entire audience. There are people that don't use a mouse. So that one's kind of nitpicky, but when you think about it, there are people that aren't clicking actually at all. Avoid repetitive link text. Again, you're not providing, when those links are taken out of context, you're not providing any additional info about the difference between these two links. Include the relevant information. We'll do a real quick demonstration, JAWS demonstration, and you can see. You want to do that now, Brian? Yeah.
If you're ready for that.
Yeah, because we're really almost done. I think I have one more thing to go over. But
Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare Dash for Members Dash Windows Internet Explorer.
nytimes.com.
Control O, open dialog, NYTIMES, period, COM. Enter. The New York Times Dash breaking news world.
About how well BC was doing relative
RSS
to other
205
places.
headings.
We were playing around to try to come up with the most horrible thing you could find out there. We thought it would be some little obscure website. This are it. This is the example of everything you shouldn't do is built into this one site. And so I'm going to use this as a commercial to talk to New York Times and see if I can get them as a client. Huh? What do you say? All right, so I'm going to bring up a links list by doing keystroke insert function 7.
JAWS dialog, links list view, digital, 1 of 395. To move to items, use the arrow keys.
Now, because this is a list, I can use a letter to jump to anything in the list. So I'm going to hit R.
R, register now. R, real estate. R, replica edition. R, read left parent 42 right parent.
Read 42, that's really useful.
R, Romney says Obama hides his agenda. R, read left parent 700 right parent.
Reading number 700. This is the kind of stuff we're talking about. It really needs to be unique for me to be able to navigate through things rapidly the way I need to access all that material.
Hit it a couple more times.
R, read left parent 408 right parent. R, read left parent 11 right parent. R, read left parent 75 right parent.
I think they get the point. What do you think?
All right. So now I need to tab through that page in sequential order.
I'm going to go back up to the top of the page.
Selected, digital.
And I'm going
Close
to
your links list dialog box.
Escape. Multimedia heading level 6. Tools and more heading level 6. Subscriptions heading level 6.
What level are we at already? 6.
Company info heading level 6. Gene studies of autism point to mutations and parents apostrophe H heading level 2 link. By Benedict Carey 58 minutes ago heading level 6.
That's the one that got me. The author is giving a heading level 6. I mean, they're pretty important, but I don't know that they're that important in relation to the article. There's really no reason why you would give an author in this context a heading level.
You get a G for graphics.
Graphic comment icon.
Comment icon.
Link graphic campaign 2012. Link graphic Mitt Romney speaking on Wednesday to the Newspaper Association of America in Washington. Link.
Start from the top, John. Go to do a control home. There's quite a few examples right in
The New York Times dash break it graphic The New York Times. Link graphic click here.
Click here. Oh, that's useful.
Link graphic subscribe to home. Link graphic Facebook. Link graphic Twitter.
Now,
Okay. You're arrowing?
I'm hitting G's for graphics.
Oh, you're going to do this.
You wanted graphics, right?
No, I want you to go to the top of the page and just start tabbing
just
through the
start
page.
tabbing
Yeah.
through. Okay, I can do that too.
The New York Times tab.
Untrainable.
Tab. Digital link.
Okay,
Tab.
we start
Home
off there,
delivery
that's
link.
fine.
Tab.
I tabbed and I didn't go anywhere.
Tab again?
Tab. Tab.
Yeah, you're stuck in something. Do a refresh. I don't know why JAWS is doing that. Just shake it up.
F5. Home delivery link. Home delivery link.
I'm going to go to
The New York Times tab.
and I'm going to hit tab.
Yep.
Tab digital link. Tab home delivery link. Tab login link. Tab register now link. Tab.
Okay, that's the first black hole I heard. That StubHub ad, it must be a Flash widget or something like that. It doesn't announce itself. So there's an example of a non-text element that's not labeled. Okay, next.
Tab home page visited link. Tab today's paper link. Tab.
I don't know why it's doing that. It's weird. Keep going.
Tab video link. Tab most popular link. Tab global link. Tab.
Again, now I think we just landed in that where do you want to sit, which is another part of the StubHub ad. Now, okay, go.
Tab.
Now we're in the StubHub ad, okay.
Tab.
I haven't found
Yeah.
that.
Tab edit type in text.
Here's an example of an unlabeled form field, which is the last thing we're going to talk about. It announced to Brian that it was an edit box, but didn't tell him what it was for. So he has no idea what he's supposed to put in here. His email address, his telephone number, something he's searching for. Now, if he tabs one more time,
Tab search button.
he'll hear the search button. But it's an example of, information came a little too late. Okay, one more time.
Tab. Tab click here link graphic.
Now, that's a link for an advertisement for ING Direct, and it just said click here. Well, that's a huge problem. I mean, ING should be mad because a blind user or even Google has no idea that ad is for ING. Okay, go ahead.
Tab subscribe to home delivery. Subscribe to home delivery link
There's an
graphic.
example of where
The doublespeak.
an empty alt tag would have been appropriate because we just heard it twice. So there's a little picture of some newspapers, and they had alt text that said subscribe to home delivery, and then there's text immediately following it with the same exact link text.
Tab personalize your weather link. Tab Facebook link graphic.
Again, not telling me what action.
Tab Twitter link graphic. Tab.
Now we're inside of one of these flash things again, but keep going. There's something
Tab.
very interesting that goes on here.
Tab. Tab unlabeled 1 button.
Okay.
Unlabeled buttons.
Tab unlabeled 5 button. Tab unlabeled 6 button. Tab.
This is the good one right here.
Tab 392,637,609 / direct semicolon VT.1 semicolon PC.1835331 underline 297 semicolon I dot 268426601 semicolon CT link.
Knit a small sweater before.
And there's one more example that we can get really
Tab.
quickly and then go back. Keep going.
Tab world link.
Okay,
Tab
so you'll
use.s
notice
link.
that we are in a navigation here.
Shift tab.
World, U.S., politics, New York, but it
Tab,
didn't announce
politics
itself as a
link.
list. Okay, there was a perfect opportunity for it to announce itself as a list. So these are just some of the examples that we went over today, all in one website.
Alt tab. JAWS. Alt tab. PowerPoint slideshow.
All right, so we'll continue here. The last thing is a brief introduction to creating forms. I actually wasn't even going to include this today because I wasn't sure that you guys could actually create forms in DayCQ. I thought that was something that the developers had to do just because forms are kind of complicated. But Scott informed me that you guys can create simple forms that, the results are emailed to you. So I thought we should go over some important things about designing forms. I could spend weeks with you talking about accessible form design, but these are the issues that you are probably going to encounter most and will make a huge difference in the accessibility of your forms. So all important information for forms, such as form instructions, must be presented before the form itself. Screen reader users go through the page linearly. We see that Brian's moving through the page top down, left to right. If you put critical information about filling out that form below the form or even below the title of the form, the chances are they're going to miss it. Okay, it's going to come too late. That information is going to come too late. Another thing about forms is that we talked about the really cool key combinations that Brian has, like H for headings and stuff like that. Well, what if you wanted to type an H into a form field? Well, to accommodate that situation, when a screen reader user enters a form field, they go into what's called forms mode. And now all those cool little keyboard shortcuts are taken away. And the keyboards are passed directly to the form. Okay, so when a user is in forms mode, they tend to stay in forms mode until the form is done. So by hitting tab, you move to the next form field in the form. Okay, that brings me to that'll be important a little later. So the submit button must be the last form element contained within a form. I put this little text here to help me remember. It says, "Remember this computer." If you ever logged into a website and you're filling out the form, and in order to save you from having to log in again, there's a little checkbox that says remember this computer, so it saves a little cookie on your computer so you don't have to log in every single time. That is almost always below the submit button. So if you're going through that linearly, a blind person would never even know that they had that really cool option so, to prevent them from having to log in every time, because they tab, they log in, they never encounter that form field. So it's important to make sure that those action items are the last. That submit is the last. And we don't see them very much anymore, but there is the ability to create that reset button. Why? Why would you ever have a reset button on a form? Okay? You'd never want it. Nobody ever wants to delete their form. In fact, they swear up and down when the page refreshes and they lose all their information. So don't use that. You really don't see them anymore, but 5 years ago you really did. All form fields must be associated with their labels using the label HTML tag. We discovered that DACQ actually enforces the use of labels, and that's a good thing, because that's probably the biggest accessibility barrier, is form fields that aren't properly labeled, and that is tying a piece of text to a form element. So in the New York Times example, they should have had the word search. They didn't have to show it. They could have hidden it using CSS or something like that. But the word search should have been there so that when Brian tabbed into that box, it said search, edit. Okay? And that's how the screen reader knows what that form field is for. If it's a phone number, if it's an address, anything. So you want to tie that information to the element. All forms should clearly indicate which form fields are required prior to the actual form inputs. Avoid cryptic hints such as the use of the asterisk or different colors as the sole means of indicating mandatory information requirements. It's really cool and helpful to put the word required, spell it out, in the label. So if it's first name, required. That's because that's what's going to get read to the screen reader user when they tab into that form field.
Again, trying to keep us from having to hear too much about things, we block the reading of some characters, so that when I get a line of stars, which look just beautiful to you as a line, I don't get to hear star, 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 and that kind of stuff. So using those kind of things may be visually obvious, but they are not very useful.
In fact, I think JAWS is by default ignores asterisks.
More than three of any repeated character, it ignores unless I tell it otherwise, and it ignores asterisks by default.
Form fields that are logically related should be grouped in a field set. If appropriate, the field set should be labeled with a legend. Think billing and shipping address here. If you have a billing and shipping address form on the same page, they both ask the same questions. Address, address to, city, state. Brian has the ability to pull all the form fields out of context just like he does links. So if you don't tie a field set around these elements, he doesn't know if he's filling out his shipping or his billing information, because the labels are all exactly the same. Avoid putting non-focusable text between form fields. Again, I told you that once a user's in forms mode, they tend to stay in forms mode. So if you put really helpful information like formatting help, like for a phone number, you say put area code with parentheses followed by 3 numbers followed by a dash followed by 4. If you put that underneath the form field or between form fields, that user never has access to that information. Okay, there's other cool tricks to do that, like pre-populating the form field with that information or something like that. Okay, that's it. That's all I have. Scott, you want to jump into the live demo, or should we take questions? Or?
Yeah, why don't we start with questions?
Okay. All right, do I have any questions? Front row.
Are there website editors that incorporate these suggestions, like a BC
Politics link.
like that, and you just drag things around on the screen? Does it actually
HTTP.
put things in there that, like, tabs that you recommend?
Context menu 1 of 3. To
In
move
some
through
cases,
leaving
yes,
menus
in
with
others,
JAWS
no.
dialog.
So,
Are you sure you want to quit JAWS?
The one example is the alt text for images. It's not required. So that can actually be a good thing. We were thinking of ways to kind of enforce it but allow an override, and Jim has spent some time looking at that. But in general, most of the things you should think about and do yourself. I think the main navigation in BC is a list, and so that helps. The framework of your page will be accessible with your navigation. I think alt text, one of the big culprits that, across the BC site is the more link, and it's used in the home page. It's used everywhere, just more, on a news article. And so that's one of the things we're really trying to change the habit of folks doing. But we want to develop some specific materials and guidelines coming out of this that we could give you a cheat sheet. And we want to be careful about forcing people to do certain things, because as we saw, like coming into this, several months ago, I would have thought you have to require the alt text. And you actually, maybe you do, maybe you don't. You need the flexibility to have it be empty as well. Can you bring up that BC web page that we created? Because I don't want to...
Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to...
I'll take my group W things unless you need me.
Okay, yeah, that's great.
I'm not going to be able to remember the link. I don't know if I'm Mac.
No, I can get at it, yeah.
So I created a sample page in DayCQ that has some issues, and I guess what we'll do is we'll ask for some volunteers to help identify some of these issues and see how many we can get.
Scott, would it be possible to have this presentation available to us?
Yes, the fine folks in e-teaching are doing a lecture capture. So that'll be available. We'll post it on our website, and we may lock it down to the BC community just so it's not publicly accessible, but we'll have that available. Yeah, and we're going to restrict you. You can't access it. Okay, so here's the page. It actually doesn't look that different from a lot of BC pages you would see. Anybody want to volunteer, raise their hand, and at least mention a possible issue? You can't see the code. Maybe we should do a view source.
We could do a view source. We could even take JAWS through it too. So another.
Or we could just start visually. What do people think areas we should look at? John.
Yes, welcome to the sample. That's probably just the style and the heading
Let's see.
there.
You want to do a view source, or do you want to use JAWS? What would be better?
I'm trying. If I come in here and look at this in Firefox, I have some tools that'll demonstrate. This is the browser I use to do a lot of testing, so there's some tools in here. So what I can do is I can say outline. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. I can say outline headings. So you can see that sample department website is a heading, and it's probably a heading level 1 because I think you have to, right? The title of the page ends up like that. And then the next heading is more information. And I bet you if I say the structure of this page, you can see that there's a red H here, and that indicates that a heading was skipped. Yeah, so the more information is an H4. There's actually a couple of levels that were skipped.
You told me to do that.
Yep. And actually, if you looked at the source code for this page, and this is something that it's hard to avoid with CMSs like this, visual ones. A lot of times, the actions you take and the actions you undo can leave behind HTML that you don't know is there. It's just empty. And I think that's what happened here with Scott. If we look at the source code for this page, there's an empty H2 in there. And he probably created the H2 and then deleted the text, and it didn't get rid of the HTML. So let's see if I can come in here.
That's important because, as you know, you can drag components onto the page in Day and not use them in Day's good enough to not show anything. Jim, you have something?
Yeah. Every page in DayCQ has the option for a subhead. So this is the big title. There's one right below it for an optional subhead. That option is always page 2. So most people don't fill it in for design purposes. Or shouldn't even say design purposes. The designers love it to be filled in because it looks nice for design purposes. But they don't have a meaningful subhead to give it, so the big applies.
Yeah, so here it is right here. It's an empty
So
H2.
this is a case where we may have to collaborate with Office of Marketing and Communications to say, okay, how do we want to handle this? I mean, we may not be able to ask people to always put something in there. Maybe that is one approach. Another is a technical solution to say if there are things in there, take it out. That might be a little more challenging, but we have to get to an answer.
There's a really cool new HTML5 tag called HGroup, where you can group 2 headings like this, and what it does is it just reads the first one. and it's meant specifically for that, so that you can have a heading level 1 with a subheading, but you really only want the heading level 1 to be treated as a heading.
Great. We can build that in.
All right. So, now that I've got all of this stuff. All right, anybody else see any other?
Anything we should look at? Yes.
I think that putting your email address under the bell would be a problem, because you'll hit go and then you won't have the,
Correct.
um,
Yes. Right. So you would have no idea that submitting this form would actually result in you getting email, a newsletter, because that information is under the form. Yeah, and then what address? It says enter address, which you're really asking for an email address, which is a specific type of address. So that's another issue.
What about the quote from Jane?
It's kind of gray,
Yeah.
not gray contrast.
Right. Right.
And it probably doesn't use the block quote because it's not indented. So it's the contrast. 2 violations there.
Right. Yeah, it's not a block quote. Yeah.
And then we see the famous more, with the ellipsis. Now, in this case, Mark, with the image, this is a place where you might want to talk about the decisions they have to make regarding alt text, because that particular image I chose isn't necessarily relevant to the page content, and so it may not need an alt, but
Right.
If I found a picture of Jane, maybe I would want to identify that as such.
Across the BC websites, you'll often notice there's a picture in the upper left corner, which is often purely decorative. It may even be randomly generated. I'm not sure, but it usually doesn't tie into the text at all. Great opportunity to just leave it out. Empty alt text. I would think that's decorative. And the eagle is a tough one, depending on what the page is about. You know, if you're talking about BC's, mascot, yeah, then you'll want to draw attention to it, but otherwise, probably not.
I think another thing that people comment on all the time is the size of the text on the BC site, and it's very small. So, I mean, you can do tricks like, Command Plus to increase the size, but I do think in the redesign with OMC that we're working on in the next couple of years, whenever that comes, that's likely to change or be addressed. Any other things on the page, Mark?
Now, there's a more link.
Yep. Noticed that. So I think we're just about out of time. Anybody have questions or comments on what? Great. Well, thanks everybody for coming. As I mentioned, this is going to be an ongoing initiative. That project doesn't have an end date. It's going to be several years. So thanks to Mark and Brian for coming. Thanks to